Well, welcome, you guys. Nice to see you. My name is Christine MacCarroll. I am a functional nutritionist. What does that mean? That means that nutrition is obviously what you fuel your body with. I'm very interested in what that does for people. And so actually what I'm interested in is how does your body function and how can we support that function using nutrition. So I specialize in women's health, and some of the areas in particular that I focus on are digestive health and hormonal balance. So that's why I'm talking about that tonight. And so what I want to do tonight is just give you kind of an overview of how hormones work in your body, and then talk about some specific things that you can do for your hormonal system as a whole. Because no matter where there's a balance or imbalance in your hormone system, there's some root causes. And those root causes are often the same, no matter how something is presenting as a symptom. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about those root causes that can be applied to anything, to any imbalance that you have hormonally in your body. And then we can talk a little bit about more specifics if you guys have some questions. Sound good? I am not a super formal person too, so if you have any questions as I'm going along, feel free to jump in or raise your hand or whatever, and we'll talk about that. So the very first thing, y'all came to talk about hormones tonight. What are hormones actually? Guesses?
Chemicals released to direct the body to do certain things.
That is exactly right. Yes. So they are chemical messengers. Basically, they go around the body and they signal different areas of our body to do different things. So we think about, for women particularly, we think about our hormone system mostly having to do with reproduction. We think about PMS and our monthly cycle. But we actually have an entire system, so it's called the endocrine system. And the endocrine system is an entire system that is all connected. And there's lots of different pieces of it. So we absolutely have our sex hormones, our female hormones. We also have thyroid hormone, which helps to regulate our energy and our mood. We have our adrenal hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which help regulate our stress response, and sometimes they can also help regulate blood sugar. We have leptin and ghrelin, which are hormones that help us to regulate our metabolism and our appetite. We have hormones that are created in our brains. So we have kind of all of these different hormones that are part of this entire system. And the way that I describe the hormone system is that if you imagine that your hormones were like a dream catcher or a spider web. And so if we had this big circle, and I keep meaning to like make one, which would be really awesome, but right now you'll just have to use your imagination. So if we had a big dream catcher, or we had a spider web, so they're all connected, right? All of the spokes are connected and there's something in the middle. But if we were to pull on one of those strings or one of those threads, you cannot just pull that one string or one thread. If you pull that one string or one thread, we're pulling the entire unit. And so that's the way our endocrine system or hormone system works. So we often see the one thing that isn't working. So we say, I have really bad PMS. I think maybe my estrogen or progesterone isn't working. Or I feel really stressed. And maybe if you've heard of cortisol, you think, well, I have this cortisol issue. Or my thyroid's kind of out of whack. Maybe, I have kind of a thyroid thing going on over here. But in reality, it doesn't matter what's the thing that gets pulled. It's overall, when one thing starts to go, it starts to pull the whole system. And sometimes the thing that you're feeling as your symptom actually isn't the first thing that got pulled. Sometimes something else pulled that system first, and that's where you start to feel the symptoms. So one of the things I want to talk about tonight, I was mentioning earlier kind of those root causes. What got pulled first? Where was the first domino to fall? Where was that first string that got pulled and started to make that whole system get out of balance? And it's not always the first thing that we think about. The other thing that I do, my approach that's really different, so our conventional medical model, we only have a certain number of tools. And so this is kind of like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So anytime a woman has any sort of PMS or endometriosis or PMDD, or cycle isn't regular, anything that's going wrong with the female cycle, what we usually do is just give the birth control pill. And that's just putting a nice big Band-Aid right on top of one of those symptoms. It's never talking about why did that happen in the first place? Where did things get out of balance that there was that problem? Same thing with thyroid. So we have actually Synthroid, which is synthetic thyroid hormone, is the top prescribed medication in the US, which when I read that I was really surprised. It's actually even more than statins, which are the drugs that we use to lower cholesterol. So we're giving out thyroid hormone like left and right, like it's no big deal, without ever saying, well, why did the thyroid go offline in the first place? Why is there a need to to bring in some extra thyroid? What's going on in there? So that what's going on in there question, that's my big question. I always want to know where did that start and why is that important? So that's just a little bit about the endocrine system overall. So how do hormones get into our bodies? They're already in our bodies. How do they get into our cells? So our cells, you can imagine nice little happy cells, little balls in our bodies. They have something called receptor sites. And our receptor site is essentially like a little glove. So imagine like a little baseball glove. We have hormones going by, and they fit nicely into that glove. So that baseball, that's just the right hormone, will come and fit into just the right receptor site. So we have receptors for estrogen, for example. Only estrogen fits in the estrogen receptor site. Thyroid hormone doesn't fit there. Insulin doesn't fit there. Melatonin doesn't fit there. Only estrogen fits there. So we have all these receptors for different hormones. And our bodies will open up and close off different hormone receptors depending on what we need. So one thing that almost every cell in our body has a receptor for is thyroid. So that's just one example. So that's why thyroid hormone is so important, and maybe one of the reasons why we tend to medicate for it is because it's really critical for us to stay alive. So somebody who has Graves' disease, for example, Graves' disease is an autoimmune condition. The body's attacking the thyroid, but often because the thyroid goes crazy and starts making a whole lot of hormone, one of the ways that they treat that is to just completely remove the thyroid. In which case somebody has to be on hormones for the rest of their life because we need our thyroid hormones to function. But that's how our hormones get in. So a couple of things that have an impact on that. So I was just going to mention one thing that is actually not a hormone. So vitamin D is not a hormone, but it's called a prohormone. So it's something that can impact our hormonal system, and we do have receptors. So we have receptors pretty much for thyroid and vitamin D throughout our entire body, which is another reason I recommend everyone in Colorado get your vitamin D tested at least once a year. We actually just are at a latitude that we can't make enough vitamin D. So you might know that you make vitamin D from sunshine and your skin, and you go outside and get it. You can run around naked all winter. I don't know if I would want to in Colorado, but you would not actually be able to make enough vitamin D. So there's a cool website on the Harvard Health website where you can go look and see where the line is, and like everyone above that line, you just don't make enough vitamin D. So that's a big issue for us here in Colorado. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the hormone sites, and now I'm going to kind of talk about my 5 top tips for helping to balance your hormones naturally. And I'm going to kind of do this David Letterman style, although I don't even think David Letterman is on TV anymore, so old school. But we're just going to go bottom to top. So my number 5. So the first thing that I'm going to say, number 5, is to prioritize vitamin S. Who knows what vitamin S is?
Stress.
Very close. Sleep, yes. Vitamin S is sleep. And I would say almost every woman I have in my practice is chronically deficient in vitamin S. There is almost no work that your body can do without enough sleep. You cannot supplement your way out of not having enough sleep. You cannot eat enough amazing food to stop the downward progress of your body if you're not getting enough sleep. One of the things I didn't mention earlier when I was just talking about the entire endocrine system, your brain is what directs your endocrine system. So you have several areas of your brain that control that, but pituitary and hypothalamus being 2 of them. This is kind of like when you leave your computer on for, I don't know, a whole week, done that. Or have 100 tabs open, we've also done that. Your computer at some point will just start fritzing, right? Like it just won't work. And what is the magic answer every time your computer won't work? Restart it. So that's exactly the same with our bodies and our brains. So those two master controllers of your brain, if you're not sleeping, they never have a chance to turn off, and you never have a chance to reboot. And that's going to automatically start to cause downstream endocrine problems. The other thing is our sleep and wake cycles are controlled by a couple hormones. So I was mentioning cortisol earlier, which some people think of as our stress hormone, but it's actually just an awake hormone. So you should have cortisol first thing in the morning. You should have a nice high level. And what it should look like is, like in Colorado, we should have a nice little ski slope that goes down throughout the day. So you should have a nice higher level of cortisol in the morning, and it should go down at night. And then kind of the opposite of that, we have a hormone called melatonin, which you might have seen for sale here. And melatonin is the opposite thing. It starts really low in the morning, and by the evening it should be really high. And melatonin is what tells your body to go to sleep. So one of the first things that we do that messes up our hormone system is we get up at weird times. We get up really early when our cortisol wasn't really ready. It wasn't high enough to help us get up and be awake naturally. Or we do things that disrupts our melatonin. So melatonin is regulated by sunshine, or light. It's regulated by light. So if we are receiving light through our eyes, particularly blue light, which is on a computer screen and a TV screen and our phones, which I've sat and watched somebody have all three of those things going at the same time, we're essentially telling our brains, hey, you can just keep that melatonin turned off. We don't need that right now, it's daytime. And then we're going to keep cortisol high at a time when it's not supposed to be high, and melatonin, which is supposed to be coming up, is actually still really low. So if you're remembering this plate, I'm going to use this plate as my web. I can't pull these strings, but it's a circle. So if I have over here melatonin and cortisol, well, maybe those are the first strings that got pulled. Maybe you didn't have enough melatonin at night because you're staying up really late and you had all your house lights on and you were looking at a bunch of screens, and your brain never recognized that it was nighttime and time to go to bed. So maybe that's the first string that got pulled. And same thing, if you're just not resting, you're absolutely not going to be able to have your brain telling the rest of your endocrine system what it needs to do. It's just not going to be able to function. So some of the things that you can do to help this, so I want this to be a helpful talk, not just here's all the things that could be wrong with you. What can you do about that? So some easy things you can do, they have some super sexy blue light blocking glasses on Amazon. And basically they're like orange or yellow tinted. They might be called gamer glasses or computer glasses, but you can also just look for like blue light blockers. There's some like super snazzy ones that cost like 80 or 90 bucks. I got mine for $15. I think they work just fine. And you can wear those around the house if you're gonna be looking at screens or keeping the lights on or something like that. There's also some apps you can put onto your devices. So the one that I use is called Flux, and I believe it's F.LUX. And those will turn off that background blue light, at least a lot, in your devices. You can't do anything for your TV, unfortunately. So if you're gonna watch TV, I would put those glasses on.
You can watch TV in those glasses?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you might see a little yellow tint, but yeah, it's totally fine. So a couple things that we can that you can also do is something I love. I just love this phrase. It's called candle down. So I just, in my mind, I imagine like a little frontier woman walking around and like putting all the candles on at night. So instead of having these bright overhead lights on, you can put some candles on, or just turn off all the lights that you're not using and keep the light that you are using pretty low. And that's going to help to just turn off that stimulation to your eyes, which goes to your brain telling you to turn off the melatonin production. And then just some natural ways to help you feel ready for bed, because one of the easiest things you can do is just have a nice nighttime routine that tells your body it's time to start turning off. I talk to a lot of women who have a hard time going to sleep because their brains are racing. They try to go to sleep, but really all they did was race around the house and do 100 different cleanup items and pay the bills and be online and do all of these things, and then they just try and go from that to laying in bed, and then they're just like wide awake. So if you create a little ritual for yourself, and it doesn't have to be a long ritual, but a 10-minute ritual that tells your body every single night, I'm gonna go to sleep, that can be a really nice way to just start to tone down. So using some lavender oil is really nice. You can put that on your pillow, you can just smell it, you can diffuse it in a diffuser, but lavender is really nice and calming. Epsom salt baths are another really nice way to start to wind down. People are like always telling me, you think I have time to take a bath? You're crazy. But if it's gonna help you go to sleep, that's that many less minutes you have to spend laying in bed staring at the ceiling. So Epsom salts contain magnesium, and magnesium is a mineral that helps our bodies to relax and go to sleep. So magnesium is a great other thing that we can do to help unwind and go to sleep. Okay, so keeping on with my countdown. Number 4, address the stress monster. So you knew this one had to come up. You were right earlier. So stress is really tough on our bodies, and we live in kind of a state of chronic stress, and we don't really recognize it because it's become our new normal. We are constantly running around like this, and then until you've actually gotten relaxed, you get to that state and you're like, wow, that's what relaxed is. It takes us, I think the average, I read this in a business magazine a couple years ago, 2 days of being on vacation before your body actually goes into relaxation mode. So people who are like, oh, I'm gonna go do a little weekend getaway, you come back and you were just barely starting to be relaxed, and then you head back into crazy stress life, right? So we really need to build in some downtime. If you can't build in a week away or 3 days away or something like that, that's okay, but you need to find ways that will help you to get your body into a more relaxed state on a consistent basis. Some of the things that we can have, some of the downstream effects, so our adrenal glands are they're stress regulators. So they're 2 little glands, they sit back on top of our kidneys. They make cortisol, which can be a stress hormone. They also make adrenaline. All of these things are just what keep us up and going. So the way that things were supposed to work, like the way our cool bodies were designed from hundreds and thousands of years ago, was you're supposed to have moments of acute stress. So if a bear is attacking you, you should have stress so that you'll run away. But what happens now is we get a nasty gram from the boss, or our kid gets sick, or we have a fight with our spouse, and all of a sudden we have this chronic stress build up that never goes away. So we don't just have the one event and then we're done. We have a chronic stress condition where we're constantly having this the cortisol and adrenaline pumping out, and those glands can actually start to get tired. So there's kind of it's not questionable, a controversial diagnosis of adrenal fatigue, which really to me just means that your adrenals are tired. And the reason I don't think it's maybe applicable to everyone who has those symptoms is that, or it's not a title you want to give, is that your adrenals can recover. So when I think of fatigue, it's like, okay, we just killed them, they're never coming back, so sad, RIP, right? But we can absolutely recover the health of our adrenal glands. It's more that we've just gone through such a period of stress that they are not able to function at the level that we would want them to function. And a lot of us go through life. I certainly taxed myself out at one point in my life. And we can go through periods of recovery and periods of stress, and our bodies are totally capable of recovering. But we have to be aware of that and be aware that there will be a point where you've stopped having the ability to keep on going. For me, I'll just give you a quick story. So I got into this field, actually not related to women's health. I got into this because my youngest daughter had a neurological speech condition, and I wasn't getting any help from conventional medicine, and Dr. Google was telling me she might never talk, and I was really, really stressed about that. So I became crazy mom, and I was staying up all night, I was reading all the time, I was working full time, I was taking care of her, I was taking her to speech therapy, and then I was staying up all night reading. So during that time, I was probably drinking a couple pots of coffee every single day. I would have this giant crash in the afternoon at 2 o'clock, and there was nothing that could save me except for my giant coffee with multiple pumps of some sort of syrupy something, flavored something in there. And it was a big mug, and I could still, because I was so flattened, I could still go to bed at night. Like that giant second thing of coffee, nothing. Once I stayed up till 2 a.m. and I was reading and I was finally ready to go to bed, I could just go to sleep. So I was in such a adrenalized state and a stressed state during that time when I was trying to help her recover, that I didn't even realize how much my body was stressed. I thought I was dealing with it pretty well. I was like, oh, I've got this, I'm helping her. I was so focused on her and I was so focused on her health that I didn't realize that I was running myself into the ground. And then a year or two later, she's fine. She had a miraculous recovery. It's actually not miraculous once you know about some things that help your body. What I perceived as miraculous. So she had this amazing recovery. She was fully returned to health. Awesome, started preschool, so happy. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't function anymore. And I realized that I had wrecked my own health in that process. And so I had tanked my adrenals. I did some testing. I work a lot with some functional lab work. Did some on myself. It's like, wow, I have like the flat line. So my little thing that's supposed to be this, the nice ski mountain curve, was just a nice flat line. And it took me a little while to recover, but I am doing great. I'm fully recovered. It's not something that goes on forever. So I just want to say that, a lot of people are like, well, what does this mean? And I can never feel good again. And that's absolutely not true. Absolutely, you can still recover from it. So we need to help out those poor, tired adrenal glands. And so some of the things we can do, or some of those things I was just talking about earlier, as far as helping out your sleep patterns. So doing things that will help your body to wind down. One of my other favorite things to do is breathing exercises. So I have two kind of favorite breathing exercises I do. One is called box breathing. And box breathing is really cool because it's actually something that they give to first responders and Navy SEALs. And you can imagine the kind of stress that these guys are under. So box breathing is breathing in for a count of 4. You hold that breath for a count of 4. You breathe out for a count of 4, and you hold that at the bottom for a count of 4. So you have 4, 4, 4, 4. You can imagine like a little box. Something else that I like to add to that is to imagine a color. So that actually brings in some different regions of your brain when you're doing this imagining. So if you close your eyes and you imagine that the breath that's coming into your lungs is a color that's relaxing to you. So there isn't a magic relaxing color. It's whatever is a relaxing color to you. So I like blues and greens, but maybe you like lavender or something. So you imagine that air, and it's coming from the bottom of your lungs and filling all the way to the top, and then you hold that all in, and then you breathe out, and it's emptying from the top to the bottom, and all the way the color is going out of your body. And you can do that for 3 or 4 rounds. You can work up to doing that for a few minutes at a time. But that will really quickly take you from that stress state into a more relaxed and grounded state. Another little kind of hack that I use is I will just sit on the floor. Like, it's very hard to put your butt on the floor and still feel in stress. So if you sit your butt on the floor and do that little box breathing, you're gonna really drop yourself out of stress really quickly. There is another pattern of breathing that I like to do, which is 4, 7, 8. So it's a similar thing. So you breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7 at the top, and you breathe out for 8. And either one of those works really nicely, and I would just say experiment with those and see which one you like. Another thing I recommend is trying to do this at a time that you're already somewhat more relaxed when you're first experimenting with it, so that you're not training your body that this is part of the stress response. You want to kind of associate relaxation, and then when you have a stressful time, you're not only tapping into the breathing itself, but into, you've already trained your body that this is what happens when you're relaxed. So that's really nice. One other thing I was just gonna say about the adrenal glands, we think of our sex hormones as women as pretty much only being made in the ovaries, but we also make estrogen in our adrenal glands. And especially as we hit menopause, as we get older, what happens is it's supposed to be this lovely little handoff. So your ovaries have been doing all this work for all this time, and they're like, okay, I'm all done. Here you go. Here's the baton pass. Adrenals, ready for you to take over that production. So adrenal glands are going to make a lot less hormones than your ovaries did during your reproductive years, but they're still going to be making some estrogen. But if you've had really exhausted adrenal glands and you've had a really, tough, stressful time and you've never found a way to manage that stress, what's going to happen? You're going to try and do the handoff, and they're going to be like, no, thank you. I don't want that. I've been doing my own thing over here, and it's been really hard for a long time, and I'm not taking that. So a lot of times women who have this really hard time going through menopause and are really symptomatic, it's because their adrenals are not able to pick up that hormone production from their ovaries. So that's another reason to try and find some ways that work for you. So I don't have one magic way. Everyone has to find the way that works for them, but finding some tools that will work for you. Okay, number 3. So address some common nutrient deficiencies. So stress, not surprisingly, causes some nutrient deficiencies. So do some of the other things that we do to help manage our hormones. So birth control pills have a huge depleting effect on our bodies. They deplete nutrients. Poor digestion depletes nutrients. And then the other favorite kind of pill for every ill is women come in with some sort of mood around their period is out of whack, and our prescription is an antidepressant. So you don't feel good, it must be that you need an antidepressant, not there could be something else underneath there. So when we give antidepressants, again, we are further depleting nutrients, and some of those nutrients are really powerful mood modulators. So B vitamins, for example, are depleted by stress and the pill and antidepressants. And when you're deficient in B vitamins, one of the first things that happens is a reduced mood and lowered energy. So the things that we're actually maybe sometimes trying to help and repair are some of the things that we're actually making worse by causing some nutrient deficiencies. So if you've taken any of those in the past and you actually haven't actively tried to restore yourself or done some lab work to find out if you're deficient, it would be a really good idea to try and find that out, see if you have those deficiencies. And then some of those things are not going to be, like B vitamins, for example. Most people are fine taking some B vitamins. It's not something that you're necessarily going to overdose on. They're water soluble, so mostly you'll pee them out. There are very few people who have some sort of genetic mutation that allows them to not process Bs as well, but for the most part, most of those are fine. Some of the other things that get depleted: magnesium, zinc, selenium, and copper. Zinc and selenium, by the way, and actually magnesium too, those 3 are all required for your hormone, for your thyroid hormone production. So your thyroid actually cannot make thyroid hormone if you are deficient in zinc or magnesium or selenium. So we have, again, a problem where we've tried to put a Band-Aid on what's going on. We said, well, here's a symptom, let's manage that symptom. And then we actually are making it worse. So you maybe started out with, I got some PMS, and you got on the pill, and now you've depleted all these nutrients, and then down the road, now you're gonna have a problem with your thyroid. And it's just because you don't have the raw materials. If you think about our bodies, that whole you are what you eat is totally true. Obviously, we don't think of it that way, but if we are missing those key nutrients, those key building blocks, you simply don't have the materials that your body needs to make the things it needs to make. So all of those are really critical for our function. All right, so number 2, this is the one where I get the most sad faces. Kick sugar to the curb. So one of the biggest hormone disruptors, and I think what I see 80% of the time in the women that I'm working with, is that first string that got pulled is insulin. So you might know insulin because you know someone who has insulin-dependent diabetes, or you just know that it helps to manage your blood sugar. But what we do is, let's say that we are staying up late and getting a bunch of blue light and waking up at weird hours, and we're just really tired. So what our bodies are wanting is, okay, we need some quick energy. So I'm really tired, I need to just be able to get some quick energy. So what do we crave? We crave sugar and starchy carbs. So, give me the carbs, give me the sugar, because that's gonna give you the little energy rush. You do get the energy rush, and then you crash. And what's happening, physiologically in your body is when you get that big, giant bump, that's actually a stressful thing. To have that much glucose in your system, we're not designed for that. We are designed to be hunters and gatherers. We are not designed to eat Pop-Tarts and drink OJ, right? think about how many berries in nature you would have to eat to get the amount of sugar in our like common American breakfast, right? So your body goes, whoa, what are we supposed to do with all of that? Well, I'm going to put out a bunch of insulin, because insulin is the hormone that helps to bring that sugar back down into balance, take it where it needs to go, put it into the cells. If that's happening every day, okay, so I eat the Pop-Tart for breakfast and then I crash, and then I am so hungry and stressed and tired that I'm going to go ahead and eat, I don't know, a bagel for lunch. Same thing. Here we go, bagel spike. Body freaks out. Okay, let's dump out a bunch of insulin. Okay, now we're going to crash. Okay, now dinner's going to come around. Well, I'm going to eat a pizza with all of that pizza crust because I just need another quick hit of energy. So we've gone like this, up and down all day. Your poor body is putting out insulin dump after insulin dump after insulin dump. And this is not a nice, steady energy, for one thing. So your mood is going like this too, not all nice and even. But the insulin is having these big highs and big lows, which is super stressful on your body. So the CDC actually estimates that 1 in 3 Americans, and way more than anybody actually knows, already has insulin resistance, which is kind of the first step on the line to diabetes. So we have insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, and diabetes is probably the longest chronic disease we have in this country. And we get that first stage of insulin resistance because we are dumping insulin in all the time because we're constantly looking for those quick energy hits. So what I see in my practice is that blood sugar imbalance in that insulin pull is absolutely the first thing that happens for almost all women. And the first thing I'm going to help somebody do is to get their blood sugar balanced, and that's going to bring so many other things into balance. I look at hormone imbalance as a downstream effect. So this isn't something that just comes out of nowhere. These other pieces have to go first. And often, without even addressing that, we start bringing these other pieces into place and that stuff resolves. I don't have to specifically address hormones. I start to address blood sugar, hormones get balanced. So that is one of the top things. The other thing is, we're not using fats as a fuel source. So we're using sugar. I just said, so you get that feeling, your brain is on fire, okay, I must have energy, must wake up, must eat sugar, right? So we kind of are constantly looking for that. We're missing out on fat as a fuel source. And one of the key things that I think has been a real problem for women is we've gotten on this low-fat diet craze. And so somewhere in the 70s, everyone started thinking low-fat everything was the way to go. And so, I see people who've been eating low-fat yogurt or no-fat yogurt and skim milk and no-fat anything for years. And besides that having a big impact on your sugar, again, we're missing those building blocks. So our steroid hormones, our sex hormones, are actually made of cholesterol. So if we don't have cholesterol, we can't have functioning female hormones. So I see a lot of infertility, and I think a big, huge problem with fertility is we don't have the raw materials. We don't have the raw cholesterol and fats to make those hormones to be able to build a healthy endocrine system. So that's another big problem with the sugar, is that we rely on that, and we totally just are not paying attention to our need for fats and cholesterol that will help us to manage things. And the last thing, which this is my number one, and this is the thing that nobody will ever think about has anything to do with hormones, but it's rock your poop. So what do I mean by that? I talk about poop all day, every day. My children think it's hilarious. But your digestive system is absolutely a critical piece of your body's ability to make hormones. So I was just telling you all of these things, they're the building blocks, right? Well, how do those building blocks get there? Again, through our digestive system. So we have to eat the right things, and then we also have to be able to digest those things. So in particular, I will give you one example. So estrogen is processed, so we make estrogen, we use it. Spent estrogen goes to our livers to get recycled. Our livers make something called bile, and spent estrogen gets dumped into bile, and bile gets dumped into the stool, and then we are supposed to eliminate it. If you are somebody who is constipated all the time, and people don't really understand constipation, not pooping every day is constipation. which a lot of people find surprising. And I talk to a lot of women who don't poop every day and they don't know that that's not normal. So what happens? That bile is sitting with your stool and the spit estrogen right there in your large intestine, in your colon, and it's going to start going out through the intestinal wall and back into your bloodstream. So now we have this used up estrogen that actually can't do any good anywhere in your body, but it's going to go sit on those receptor sites I was talking about earlier. So it's going to sit there, and now active estrogen can't go to that place. So you might actually have enough estrogen in your body, but it's those spots are being occupied by used up estrogen that isn't doing you any good. So having a digestive system that is functioning well is going to be huge. The other thing is if you are not digesting your fats, for example, or if you're not eating enough fat, same thing, your body's ability to put those things back into circulation is going to be affected by your digestion. Our hormones are actually also moderated by our microbiome. So our microbiome is this like happy little colony of bacteria and yeast that lives in our large intestine. And there's actually been a whole lot of research just in the last 6 months about the impact of those bacteria on recycling our female hormones. And so a lot of those things that I was talking about earlier that cause us to have some nutritional deficiencies, so the pill and over-the-counter medication, and stress, of course, and then other things that are just out of our control. So we have some polluted air, maybe the tap water isn't awesome, but all of these things disrupt that happy little colony of bacteria that live in our gut. If we don't have that happy little colony active and working well, we're not going to have an ability to recycle estrogen, and that's going to have an impact on our female hormone system. Talking about some of the others, so I've talked a little bit more about female hormones, but thyroid is also one of the biggest things that I see issues with for women. And if there is anything going on with the thyroid, I'm always going to start with the gut, because the thyroid, without going into too long of a story about thyroid, the thyroid the hormone that your thyroid gland makes, it's this little gland right here, it's inactive. It actually can't do anything in your body. So it's called T4, and it has to go over to your liver and to your intestinal tract to be converted into T3, which is the active form that your body can use. So you don't need to know the whole process, but just know your body's making an inactive form that has to be made active. And if you have problems with your digestion, it's not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to make that conversion from something that isn't able to work in your body into something that can work in your body. So it may be that the short-term solution is to do things that will help you support that active form, which is the T3. But for the longer term, I'm going to be looking at, well, how do we support that function and that conversion to make sure that can happen, to make sure that your body on its own, without putting in something synthetic, can make that conversion from T4 to T3. So that's a huge piece. Eating a lot of vegetables is one way that you can help to have a regular bowel movement. That is probably one of the top things that I see missing on a whole lot of food journals when I'm looking at food journals, is we just don't get enough vegetable matter to have enough fiber to be binding the excess hormones and pulling them out of the body. So that whole eat your veggies thing, totally true. Can't get around that one. I have a goal for myself. So I'm gonna turn 40 in 7 weeks. That's my little line in the sand. I have a whole bunch of things I'm doing for myself in preparation. I'm like, okay, I gotta rock this. So I am trying to eat 4 cups of veggies every day, and I'm trying to up my game a little bit. There's a woman named Dr. Terry Walls who actually essentially cured herself from MS. She was to the point where so MS is a degenerative disease, autoimmune disease. She was in a wheelchair, like it was even a reclined wheelchair. She couldn't even sit up all the way. She started eating 6 to 9 cups of vegetables a day, and she's now riding her bike to work. So if you doubt the power of vegetables, that's a pretty amazing recovery story. But that's a huge thing, to be able to help your body just stay functioning and keep the spent hormones that you don't need coming out of your body, and then some of those things that need to make conversions happening happily in your gut. So that is my top 5. So here's the bonus round. how do you check some of these things out? So I mentioned that I do some functional work. Some of the easiest things are just to ask your doctor for some basic blood work. So you absolutely want to get a vitamin D level tested. If you have exhaustion, or you're cold all the time, especially cold hands and feet, if you have kind of thinning hair, the outside of your eyebrows is thinning, those are indications that you might have a thyroid imbalance. So some of the things you can ask for are a TSH, free T3, free T4. You want those because that's actually the active form of what you can use. And it's always good to check antibodies. So there are TPO and TPA are antibodies that you would want to get checked. You might want to check for nutrient deficiencies. So like I just said, B vitamins are one of those critical ones that get super depleted by all of the things that we do to try to make ourselves feel better. And B vitamins are one of those things that will automatically, when we're deficient, you're going to start tanking, you're going to start not feeling good. Personally, I have a genetic predisposition to not process B vitamins super well, so I need to take some extra every day, and I can really tell on the days that I'm missing my B vitamins. I really need to have some regularly. Digestion, I mentioned poop. I do a lot of stool testing. Get so much information from doing stool testing because we're looking at digestive function, and that, like I said, impacts so much of the rest of your body. You can do adrenal lab work by looking at saliva or dried urine. Those are the top two ways to address those two hormones. I do a lot of that in my practice. And yeah, I think those are the big ones to look at. So I want to make sure quickly that I gave you takeaways on what to do for everything I said. So the sugar one, I don't know if I gave you a specific thing. The World Health Organization recommends 50 grams of sugar or less per adult per day. So if you start to track your sugar, you might be really surprised how fast you get to 50 grams. It's
fruit sugar also. Sorry.
That is added sugar.
Okay.
But if somebody has a lot of hormonal imbalance or blood sugar imbalance, I'm going to say you got to start looking at fruit too.
Okay.
Yeah. But yes, good question. Okay. So actually, I lied. The World Health Organization says 25 grams. The Heart Association says 50. So I think they're just like, they're the crazy liberal people over there with 50 grams. So, and for a child, it's actually 12. So like for my kids, my husband loves these Noosa yogurts, which you would probably see. They are super delicious. I mean, it's true, they are amazing. But most of those have like 15, 16 grams of sugar in one of those containers. And that's on the low end. There's some of them that have like 22. So if a kid has that as a snack, they've already in one yogurt totally gone beyond their World Health Organization for sugar in a day, just from that one yogurt. So you can see how easy it is to grow up to be an adult who has insulin resistance. So for the poop thing, I mentioned lots of veggies, also probiotics. So taking a probiotic supplement is great, but also eating probiotic foods. So some of those are kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut. I also really like miso soup. Just different things that are in that. If you go to any natural foods grocery store, they will have a section of fermented and cultured foods. Go pick something up and try it. Getting some good variety in there is awesome. We talked about sleep and stress, the nutrient deficiencies you can do a little test on. Okay, so I gave you your takeaways for each of those things. So I'm just really gonna quickly mention a couple of herbal supports that you can use. So again, my focus is always going to be address the why, address the root cause, and that's going to be what's going to help find resolution. And at the same time, sometimes you just want to feel better. Sometimes you don't feel great, and while you're working on all the other things, you want to help your body feel a little bit better. So my top three herbal supports that I like for women, licorice is, so that's why I have this tea, so this licorice tea. So licorice is part of a family of herbs called adaptogens, and adaptogens are kind of just like exactly what that word sounds like. They help your body adapt. So if you're somebody who's been in a lot of stress, they can help you to just bring some balance. I was devastated to learn a couple years ago that I had to give up coffee after I just told you how I used coffee forever. It shouldn't have come as any surprise to me that I had to give up coffee, but it wasn't working for me anymore. I had to give it up. And the thing that saved me when I had to give up coffee was licorice tea. It's not a stimulant, so it's not going to be something that like hypes you the way that coffee does. But yeah, it gives you a little gentle energy lift. So, for me, 2 or 3 in the afternoon is a time where I do start to just naturally have a little dip. Most people do, even when I'm managing all the other blood sugar things beautifully. And so licorice is kind of my go-to to just help me feel a little bit better. It's a beautiful adaptogen. It's really helpful for times of stress and for women's hormones. It's also actually great for our digestive systems. Chaste tree is a wonderful herb for PMS. So if you struggle with different symptoms around your time of the month, it's also called Vitex, but Vitex or chaste tree or chaste berry tree, it has a few different names, but that's a really great one. And you actually take it throughout the month. So it's not something to just take like an aspirin when you have a headache. You actually do want to take it throughout the month to help you bring some balance. But it's a lovely herb that helps a lot of women to regulate their cycles. And then the last one, which has been provided so nicely here, is maca. I love maca so much. So this is an herb that I use in my smoothies a few times a week. And then if I'm having any hormonal symptoms around my cycle, I will make kind of a little maca milk. So I do coconut milk, and I put some maca in and some cocoa powder. And I'm pretty sensitive to sweet stuff, and I don't want to do that sugar thing. So I use some, maybe a little bit of honey, but I also use something called Yakin syrup, which unfortunately is something you have to mostly buy online. But it's a natural sweetener that is not very impactful to your blood sugar. And I just make a little hot tea out of that, and it's a really kind of nice tasting. This has kind of almost a butterscotch taste to it. And it tastes nice, and it will help to kind of calm the flare up of the hormonal time of the month. So this one, the directions on it say a teaspoon to a tablespoon. I use a teaspoon pretty regularly throughout the month in my smoothie. So 2 or 3 times a week I'm putting this in a smoothie. Really, really great at helping to moderate your hormone system. And it's actually great for men too. So those are my top 3 herbals that are great for most women that are like harmful. Did anybody have any questions or any particular hormone thing that I didn't talk about? Yeah.
I love coffee and drink a lot of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a lot of stress problems, and I had a problem with my adrenals. I mean, really burnt out energy. And I had the adrenals tested, and mine was peaking at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And it was staying like
dysregulated,
pretty low. So I'm doing better.
Awesome.
Taking supplements, but I still love coffee, and even though I'm feeling better, I still want to drink a lot of coffee. What's a good way to start lowering, like how fast? I'm hoping to have some like 1 cup still.
A little bit, yeah. So everybody's going to be different. One of my big things is bio-individuality, which just means that your body is unique to you, and you have to figure out what works best for you. For some people, I hate to say it, that means no coffee. At least while you're healing. So it doesn't have to be like forever and ever, but while you're really trying to help your body get into a reset, you might want to avoid coffee. If you're gonna do it, I would have a small amount, like 8 ounces or even 6 ounces, like a European cup and not an American cup of coffee, and put some fat in it. So if you heard of bulletproof coffee,
I've been doing pasteurized
butter.
No, I've just been doing the half and half.
Okay, yeah.
From the cows. But I noticed it makes a big difference. The grass-fed cows, it's a lot oilier.
Yeah, there's good fat. There's actually a kind of fat that cows make when they eat grass that they don't make when they eat corn. So some kind of fat in your coffee is another thing that will just help to slow that giant coffee.
Okay, stay away
spike.
from the black then.
Yeah, so I would definitely put some fat in it. So whether that's half and half, coconut cream is really great, like the kind that's in the can, not the kind that's just the thin stuff on the shelf. You can do, so bulletproof coffee is just coffee with fat in it. So they put MCT or butter, MCT oil, which is a kind of a coconut oil derivative, or butter, and you can blend that in the blender to make it frothy instead of like a sad little pool of oil on the top of your coffee. But some kind of fat is going to help to moderate that.
Because the
caffeine
coffee's doing the same thing to me, right?
It is
As the
totally doing
sugar.
the same thing to you. Yes.
And it's preventing me from staying even. So to heal, I have to find a way to stay more even.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I went cold turkey off of coffee, and I had a terrible, nasty headache for 2 days. So the first night, I had a headache all day, which, this should just be telling you how bad my system, did not need this. Had a terrible headache all day. My daughter asked me to lay down with her. She was going to bed. She's like, just lay down with me for a minute, Mom. So I lay down at 7:30 at night, and I was just done. I just fell completely asleep, and I slept the entire night until 7 whatever the next morning. I slept for 12 hours, and I felt remarkably better the next day, but I still had a little headache. And then I had another day of a little tiny headache, and then I was done.
I don't get hit when I cut. I actually get emotional responses. If I get anxious, I think to have coffee. It makes me feel better.
Yeah. And it can be kind of an upside down thing. So you might know that Ritalin is a stimulant. So kids who have ADHD who are wah, and then they get the stimulant, it actually calms their nervous system.
Yes, that happens to me with coffee.
Yeah, so everyone reacts a little bit different. I really do like licorice tea as a way to help your body adjust off of coffee. I think that's a nice adjusting. And you can go fast or as slow as you want. So cold turkey is one way. You could also say, okay, well, I'm just going to have half calf today, or I'm going to have 3/4 calf or something, and just work your way down really slowly, making sure that you're drinking a whole lot of water at the same time to flush any of that out.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's good you did it.
It can be done. Yeah.
Are taste root and maca powder, are those some things that you can take too much of, or does your body just flush excess?
I actually don't know, because I've never had anybody take ridiculous amounts of those things. Most herbs, it is a good idea to moderate your intake. Kind of the thing I hear around the water cooler is oh, it's natural. You can take as much of that as whatever. But I don't think that you can say that something is effective at the same time as you can say you can take as much as you want. It's not going to have an effect on you. I hear that a lot actually around essential oils. People are like, oh, they're natural. You can take them internally. And I love essential oils. I just mentioned lavender, and I use them a lot at my house, and even some in my practice. But I don't think that you can say it's super powerful and has all of these amazing healing benefits that we say essential oils do. And at the same time, you can just take a whole bunch of them and put 5 drops in a pill and take them. But that's just true of a lot of natural stuff. So the maca, starting with a lower amount, kind of working your way up. Same with the chaste tree. They actually are going to have an impact on your body. So I would just be paying attention to your body's response.
Thank you.
Is any of this related to body temperature, Raynaud's and things like that? Is there anything like that?
What was the question?
Raynaud's,
So Raynaud's is an autoimmune condition. So it's more, that's actually related a whole lot to gut health. So anything I'm just trying not to get totally sidetracked, kind of the 3-legged stool of autoimmunity is genetic predisposition. And that can be anyone in your family having any autoimmunity. So it doesn't have to be that they have the same condition that you have, but any autoimmunity genetically predisposes you. My mom has Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid, so I'm predisposed to have some kind of autoimmunity. And it would be wherever my weak link is in my body, how it would manifest. So an environmental trigger, which we may or may not know what that is. It might be dietary, it might be something in the environment or heavy metals. It can be a lot of different things. Third leg is the condition of your gut. So if gut health is impaired, if there is, you might have heard the word leaky gut. Basically, we're supposed to have some permeability, things are supposed to be able to get in and out of our gut. But if there's too much, if we have big holes instead of little holes, then whatever's leaking out, whatever's getting out into your bloodstream is going to be seen as an invader by your body, and it's going to trigger an immune response. And then we're going to start the systemic inflammation. So I can't control genetics. Genetics are genetics. Immune triggers, we have some control over those. Some of them we know, some of them we don't know. You might have been triggered 10 years ago and not know it, but the thing we do have control over is our gut health. So absolutely, anytime I am working with somebody who has an autoimmune condition, the very first thing we're going to do is talk about that. Yes?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions actually. Can you take too much vitamin D? I have I get a shot of vitamin D every week, and it makes you feel great.
Yeah.
And, but then one time I had a test from a doctor, regular MD thing, and said, you have way too much vitamin D in your system.
I would wonder what method they were using to test, and sometimes you can have, so if it was like a serum B,
Yeah.
that might just be what's in your body, but you might not actually be uptaking and using that. That might be what's floating around your bloodstream, but you're not actually able to make use of those B vitamins. So, kind of the test that I would say is a good test is MMA, which is such a long word that I can't remember all of what it stands for. But you can do that via urine or blood, and that'll give you a better measurement of if you actually have where you are with your B vitamins. Unless you have a genetic predisposition, most people just pee out extra B vitamins because they're water soluble. So the fat soluble vitamins are really the only ones to worry about building up too much in your body. But some people do have a genetic predisposition to either not tolerate certain forms of certain B vitamins or to have a problem using them. So in that case, you need to just be a little bit more careful. Pay attention to your lab work, pay attention to how your body's feeling, and make sure that you're getting the right forms.
Okay. And my other question is about honey. I love honey. And I eat honey, but I get the really good, thick, not the watery kind. I mean, the really good kind.
Yeah.
And I put it in my tea every day, and then sometimes when I want a little bit.
I love honey. Yeah.
And I love it. But it's filled with great vitamins.
So honey's biggest claim to fame, the thing that it can most help you with, is really if you're getting local honey and you tend to have allergies, it can help with that. There's not really a lot of nutritive value to honey as such. Maple syrup has trace amounts of some minerals and B vitamins, but even then I can't really tell you it's a health food, it's just a less bad food. And I still use it. I mean, if I'm going to use a sweetener, it's going to be honey or maple syrup. But this is another one of those things where everybody's body responds a little bit differently. If you have any blood sugar issues, those things are still going to cause blood sugar problems. If you were really concerned or really thinking that it might be an issue, you could actually get one of those glucometers that when people who have diabetes use to test their blood sugar. Get them over the counter, they don't require a prescription. And 20 minutes after you eat some honey, you take your blood sugar and see where it's at. And if you're spiking way up, so much above like 120 or so, I would say that might not be a food that you want to be eating all the time.
Right. Well, I get it here, and it's funny because my husband said, and the honey that I got is from Brazil. I think it says it's from Brazil. And my husband said, "Is this going to help me with my allergies?" And I said, "Yeah, when you go to Brazil."
Exactly. Yes. So now you just need to start planning to eat Brazil. Yeah. So it's individual.
It's vitamin D. We get too much vitamin D.
You can. So that's why you want to test that. And so what I say is if you're taking, so first of all, take D3 instead of D2. That's the form that your body is going to be able to use the best. But if you're taking D and you get a blood test, if your blood test shows that your D is looking good and sufficient, that means you're at the right dose of D. That doesn't mean you should stop taking it. If all of a sudden you've been taking D for a while and your blood levels of D are super, super high, then that's an indication you need to take less. But the best way to monitor that is just to do a blood test. They are so super cheap. It really should be something that's like a no-brainer to have your doctor request that.
So I have it tested once a year. I don't know if it should be more often than that. The doctor thinks only once a year.
Yeah, and it just kind of depends on where. If you're looking pretty steady and every time you get it tested you're at a pretty good level, that's fine. If you've been struggling, if it's been really low for a while, if you have an autoimmune condition, if you start to have other symptoms, then you might want to try, every 6 months or something like that. But if you also change your vitamin D dosage really drastically, I would want to test it again maybe after 3 months. So let's say you went from not taking any vitamin D to taking 10,000 IU every single day. Then in 3 or 4 months, I would want to test that and make sure that we weren't sending you on the totally wrong direction.
Mine was about the time.
Same thing, yeah.
How would you treat that? Because we were talking about vitamin problems and that affects sleep and how would you go about fixing that?
Addressing that,
Yeah.
So again, every person is kind of an individual, but when I'm looking at something isn't going wrong or going right with the thyroid, I want to see where in the line it's happening. So if it's TSH, which is what most doctors are testing, if that's the only thing that's going on, which would be kind of surprising, then it might be something to do with your hypothalamus and pituitary, which is your brain signaling down to your thyroid. If you were making plenty of T4, but then you had really low T3 levels, I would say we would want to look at your gut and your liver, because that's where that conversion is happening. If all of that looked fine, but then you had, or if you didn't have high T4, or your T4 was low, then I would say that's a problem with your thyroid is not telling your body to make enough T4. So I kind of want to know where in the cycle things were going wrong to see where we want to start addressing that. But any of those things that we talked about tonight, so like sleep and stress and balancing your blood sugar and having a good digestive tract, all of those things will help to bring the thyroid into balance.
Oh, I have another question.
Yeah.
You know how there's all these issues about rice and that it has arsenic in it from the water? I started getting rice here, I buy everything here, from Madagascar, because I was hoping maybe the soil was in better shape in Madagascar than it is here. Have you heard any?
I have not heard about specific. I know that California and Indian rice are pretty similar in their arsenic content. I do not know about Madagascar. But yeah, that would kind of be dependent on how you were presenting to and if you've done testing and were high in arsenic, whether that was a concern for you.
Do you limit, or do you have like should you eat it a couple times a week, or do you try to limit?
I think for most people, it's good not to have it more than a couple times a week, just because that is a concern, and arsenic is obviously not good. So, yeah. I'm gonna do a quick, I don't know if this is on time.
You want time?
Yeah.
8:11.
Okay, so we're right about. So I'm just gonna quickly let you guys know about how you could get in touch with me if you want to talk to me more one-on-one about anything that we talked about tonight. So there's my contact information. I have some brochures. If you send me an email, I'll send you a packet that has all of the information that I shared tonight in a nice little ebook. So I can't actually collect your information, but you can email me and then I can send that to you. So my email is just Christine, which is my first name, CHRISTINE @Taproot Nutrition, which is my business name there, .com, right there. So if you send me an email and let me know that you were here and you would like a copy of that, I will be happy to send that to you. So like I said, just kind of all of those things that we talked about in one little book. And then I also have a group program for women coming up in 3 weeks, and it's going to be online. So I love this. I super love working with people in person, but I know just from talking to a lot of women that sometimes it's hard to get someplace, especially to come every week. So this is going to be a totally online class. It's going to be Thursday evenings at 7 for 6 weeks. We'll talk about hormone balance, we'll talk about lifestyle, mindset, nutrition, just all of the things that women I see in my practice need to bring their lives into balance. So on my website, there's a link to that. So the program is called Balance and Thrive, and you can check that out there too. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.